this topic is very important in terms of like you will end up using what you're going to learn today throughout your life if you're developing programs for anything, for developing software, for automating any task. So the topic is functions. So you may have already been using, you may already know that you have been using functions since we started off this discussion. I'll be talking about it in a while. But what are functions? So functions, first let me give you an example. So suppose that you have to perform a certain task. Maybe let's say print the information of a student, maybe their name, their roll number, their email address, and what courses they are enrolled in. So let's say four information associated with each student I want to display. I want to print it on my screen. Okay. And suppose we have, let's say, 100 students in this class. How would I do that? Would I be writing 4 print statements for name, email, ID, and classes they are enrolled in for every student? Means like 400 statements. I cannot do that. This is a very inefficient way of doing it. Okay, so I should be creating a code that should be able to execute itself as many times as we want. Let's take this as an example problem. Suppose that you are working in an industry and you are given a task developing a weather app, and suppose you're working for a company which operates from Europe. You are in United States, you are used to monitoring temperature in Fahrenheit, but the folks there in Europe, they deal with the Celsius. Okay, so you need to convert the temperature of Fahrenheit into Celsius. Okay, so suppose that you're given a values F1, F2, and F3 corresponding to Fahrenheit, different values, and you write a program, Python program like this. Now you do not push yourself to recall what is the formula, it's written up there, formula for converting a temperature from Fahrenheit to Celsius. Assume that F1 corresponds to the Fahrenheit value captured at 1 p.m. Okay, so 1 p.m. you convert it and store it in another variable, let's call it Celsius, captured at 1 p.m. Okay, same is the case with 2 p.m., 3 p.m., and so on and so forth. So if you have to convert all the Fahrenheit values throughout the day, like let's say 24 hours, or if you're going more precise, maybe every minute, so you can imagine like how many instructions you would want to write. Okay, so this is clearly redundant code that we are clearly using every time whenever we need to convert a function. So this can be reduced by grouping predefined statements for repeatedly used operations, and this is generally referred as functions in any programming language. Okay, let me give you another example, an ordinary simple example. We have a machine, let's say projector. Okay, and what I do is I provide the input to this projector by connecting it to my computer screen, and it must process something inside it, right? And then display the output on the projector screen. Okay, same is the case. You can consider a function as a black box. Let's call it temperature converter. So as a user, you do not need to know what is going inside it. As a user, I do not need to know what is going inside the projector, how it is processing the logic. You just provide the input in this example in Fahrenheit, and you get the output and whatever or however you want to produce the output. Okay, so it will take the input and produce the output. As a user, you do not need to worry about it. But since we are learning this course, you need to be concerned as a developer. So as a developer, you will be the one who will be developing this logic, the logic inside this black box. Okay, so let's go back to the same scenario again. We are working in an industry. Let's say we call this function in Python like this. We would write the functionality of the requirement here like this. We would give a name, just like in this example, we have given a name temp converter. We will give a name, first of all, the function, far or maybe more meaningful name Fahrenheit to 2_Celsius. You can give as elaborative name as possible. And what you are specifying here is the input. So it will be receiving some input. We call it F. and then we are using that value of f here in the formula and assigning it to another variable called c, and then we are returning output, generating the output c. Okay, so this is how function in Python generates an output or returns an output to the external environment. Okay, so just consider thought of it as a black box. We provide the input to this machine, it processes according to how we want to process it, and then generates an output. Okay, so once we rewrite our code like this, how our main program is going to be revamped. So you see it will turn into something like this. So the main program is, we are calling this function Fahrenheit to Celsius, this function for F1, whatever the temperature value of F1 is, and it will, once Python reads this, it will jump to this part of the code and it will execute this logic and then generates an output by returning C, which will appear here and then will be assigned to C1. Okay, same is the case with C2 and C3. Now you might be wondering, like, we haven't reduced the number of lines. The number of lines are still same. Agreed? So number of lines are still same. So what is the point of like replacing this formula with this one? So in this particular example, we have a straightforward task to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. It might be more complicated task, may not be defined in a single line. So let's say our function or a machine would require us to first convert into Celsius and then print right away on the screen and then perform some other operations, maybe like hundreds of lines of code. Now in that case, your main program will still remain intact. Okay, it will still be calling this thing, that piece of code, maybe hundreds of lines of code, that many number of times, as many times you call it. Okay, so you do not need to write these many statements again and again and again. Make sense? Is it clear? Any question? This is very important concept. You will end up using it throughout your career. Okay, so make sure that you understand it. How we create a function, what we write inside it. It may not be necessary to generate an output. Okay, what we need is we want to perform some operation, and the reason why we are creating function, because we want to perform that operation repeated number of times. Okay, if you know that your program is going to execute that piece of code only once, then there's no point of creating function. Although you can still create function to make it look modular and like in a proper, like categorize it separately, but the main function or main functionality of a function is to call it as many number of times as we want. Understand? Okay,